Next on GPS, almost 60 years ago, Jane Goodall began her work that changed how we all think about animals. Suddenly, the animal kingdom was more human, and we perhaps were more animalistic. I was lucky enough to talk to her this week, and she's still teaching us about animals and ourselves. Come back for this fascinating conversation in a moment.
Want a daily dose of Fareed and his team? Now you can get it with Fareed's Global Briefing, the newsletter that gives you.
Dr. Doolittle may have talked to the animals, but he, of course, is fictional. Jane Goodall, on the other hand, is real, and she does speak chimpanzee. She begins many of her talks by offering a greeting in that primate's native tongue.
Me, Jane.
Almost 60 years ago, she traveled to Tanzania and ended up living among this species, which is the closest relative to us humans. What she learned would change our perception of animals and thus of ourselves. I had the great honor of talking to her this week. I started by asking her how her amazing career began.
Well, I was 10 years old when I met Tarzan of the Apes in a little book and fell in love with him, and we married the wrong Jane. And so it was 10 years old when I had a dream. I will grow up, go to Africa, live with wild animals and write books about them. And everybody laughed at me. How will you do that? We didn't have any money. World War II was raging. Africa was far away. And I was just a girl. Jane, dream about something you can achieve. But my mother, my amazing mother, said, if you really want something, you're going to have to work extremely hard, take advantage of all opportunity, but don't give up. And I've taken that message to young people, particularly in deprived communities. And I wish Mum was alive to know how many people have come up to me and said, Jane, thank you. You've taught me that because you did it, I can do it too. So anyway, the opportunity came when I had a boring job in London. I was invited to Kenya. I was 23, which is about like a 17-year-old today. We were very naive after the war. And I was invited to stay with a friend, and I met the famous Louis Leakey, and he's the one who gave me the opportunity to go and live, not with any animal, but the one most like us, the chimpanzee.
And was the opportunity designed from the start that you would live with chimpanzee? How did that part happen?
Well, I always, I'd watched animals all my life, and I knew there was nobody out there doing anything. So what I knew was I've got to get the chimpanzees to trust me so that I can learn about them. But the big problem was there was only money for 6 months. And the chimps were very shy, and they took one look at this weird white ape and ran away. And, as weeks became months, I became increasingly nervous because I knew if I didn't see something exciting, that would be the end, and I'd have let Leakey down and be the end of my dream. But through my binoculars, I was beginning to learn about aspects of their behavior. And one chimpanzee, darling David Greybeard, he had a beautiful white beard. I don't know why David, but David Greybeard. And he's the one I saw using and making tools to fish for termites. And it was that enabled Leakey to go to National Geographic Society. Not only did they agree to continue to fund the research, but they sent out a filmmaker, Hugo van Lauwijk, who became my husband, and it was his early footage that took the story of Jane and the chimps around the world.
And why was that so important? It was that you were suddenly seeing the connection between the chimps and humans, because if they were able to make tools, they had some kind of intelligence.
Well, the point was that science back then believed that humans and only humans used and made tools. So I was showing that that wasn't true.
What did it take, when you think about it, to get those chimps to trust you? Because, I mean, this is something that translates well beyond, simply about chimps. It's how do we as human beings make others trust us, and how do we trust other humans?
Well, I think the important thing for me was not to push too fast. I wore the same colored clothes every day, so there was nothing new. And patience. patience. When you study animals, you simply must have patience. And I was, I guess, born with patience. I was born loving animals.
And did you feel as though there was a point at which something changed? Was there a moment, or was it just a slow, incremental extending of their trust to you?
There was one moment for me that was a very seminal moment. I was actually following David through the forest, and I thought I'd lost him. And I came through this tangle of vegetation, and he was sitting. He was looking back, and it looked as though he was waiting for me. I don't know, maybe he was. So I sat down near him, and there was a ripe red whale palm nut, which chimps love. So I held it out to him on my palm, and he turned his face away. So I put my hand closer, and he turned, he looked directly in my eyes. He reached out, he took the nut and dropped it. Must have been something wrong, I don't know. But very gently squeezed my fingers. And that's how chimpanzees reassure each other. So in that moment, we communicated with each other perfectly in a gestural communication system that must have predated human words. And I think that was the moment when I thought, this is what I have to do. I just have to carry on.
The thing that I was most struck by was, in the first phase, your experience with the chimpanzees is, very benign. And then you see what happens when another tribe, as it were, comes in. And this savage war that takes place between the two groups. What did you learn from that?
Well, it was a big shock. I'd already learned how like us they are in so many ways, like kissing, embracing, holding hands, patting one another, begging for food, the close bonds between mothers and family members, the competition between males for top rank, a lot of swaggering and posturing, reminding me a lot of some male politicians today, no names. And but I thought they were like us but nicer. And then came this war that you mentioned. They were killing individuals they had groomed with, played with, fed with. So just like a civil war. And it took me a long time to make terms with it. But just as we too have this brutal side, we have a compassionate, loving, altruistic side, and so do they.
And when you look at the way in which human beings go to war now, exactly as you said, they will sometimes go to war and kill the people they live with, their next door neighbors, their relatives. Do you think that all of that is at some level very primal, and that that this is a reflection of our ape-like tendencies?
Do we have some kind of instinctive, aggressive tendencies? You can't look around the world and say no. We do, but we have, the biggest difference. We've developed this intellect, an explosive development of the intellect. Think what we can do. And so we actually are capable of monitoring our own behavior. And if you look around at the ordinary general population, you may hear, oh, I could kill him. But we don't mean it. And the trouble is that war today is not the kind of simple territorial behavior that it was with our early ancestors or some of the indigenous people. It's all to do with economic development and money and oil and things like that. So it's completely different in a way.
When we come back, more with the indomitable Jane Goodall. She is 84 years old and is on the road for more than 3/4 of the year. How does she do it? And what words of wisdom does she have for us, mere mortals? Back in a moment.
Closed captioning brought to you by Ollie. Delightful nutrition to keep you happy from the inside out.
Welcome back to this special edition of GPS from here in Davos, Switzerland. More now of my interview with the great primatologist, Jane Goodall. Do you think human beings have lost something in the degree to which they are unconnected? We are unconnected with nature and with the animal world in general? I mean, you talked about being in a rainforest and it being a spiritual experience. What are we losing?
We're losing an awful lot. We have a program now, JGI, Roots and Shoots, which began again in Tanzania with 12 high school students in 1991. And it's now in nearly 80 countries. I was meeting so many young people who didn't seem to have hope. And mostly they were just apathetic, didn't seem to care. But some were very depressed and some were very angry. And I began talking to them. And they basically said the same thing. You've compromised our future, and there's nothing we can do about it. So this saying, we haven't inherited the planet from our parents, we've borrowed it from our children, but we haven't, have we? We've stolen. Aren't we still stealing the future of our children as we go on destroying the environment? We depend on the environment. But when they said there's nothing we can do about it, I thought, no, we've got a window of time. If we get together, we have time to start healing the harm that we've inflicted. So the main message is every single individual, that's you and me and everybody in the audience and everybody who's listening, each one of us make an impact on the planet every single day, and we can choose what sort of impact we want to make.
One final question. What is this prop doing between you and me?
Okay, well, he's called Mr. H. He was given to me 28 years ago by a man called Gary Horn. Gary Horn was blinded age 21 in the US Marines. He decided to become a magician. Everybody said, Gary, how can you be a magician if you're blind? He said, well, I can try. He does shows for kids. They don't know he's blind. At the end, he'll say, something might go wrong in your life. You never know, but if it does, don't give up. There's always a way forward. He does scuba diving. He does skydiving. He's taught himself to paint, blind, never painted before. Anyway, he thought he was giving me a stuffed chimpanzee for my birthday, and I made him hold the tail. Chimps don't have tails, Gary. And he said, never mind, take him where you go, and you know my spirit's with you. So he is my symbol for the indomitable human spirit, the people that you hear about, the people I meet who tackle what seems impossible and won't give up. And, you know, there are icons, Nelson Mandela, who emerged from 17 years of hard physical labor and had the amazing ability to forgive, so that with de Klerk he could, you know, end the evil regime of apartheid. But all around us, there are people tackling personal or environmental or whatever, big ones or small ones, and either succeeding or inspiring other people to join them in the battle. And I think the most important thing, every single one of us, that's every single one of this audience, every single person who's listening, we all have that indomitable spirit. But we don't always recognize it, we don't always feed it, we don't always grow it, we don't always let it out into the world to do good, to inspire, to take action.
Okay, one final thought on indomitable human spirit.
And the inspiration rubs off, so you better hold him.
I will hold him. You also have, I don't know whether it's spirit, whether it's mind, whether it's temperament, or whether it's a genetics, but you're 84 years old, you travel 300 days a year. What's the secret of not getting jet lag?
It doesn't exist. I go by the sun. The sun rises, it's morning. The sun sets, it's night.
There you have it, the indomitable human spirit. Such an honor.
Harris, a live